recording.
Okay.
So thank you.
I was in Florida for that meeting, so I wasn't available, so I can't vote on it. I don't know if we probably don't have a quorum then, right?
Yeah, I think we have a quorum here. We have more
Okay.
than 3 of us.
Oh, Pete's here now. Okay, I see.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that was there. Yep.
So motion to accept the minutes as presented,
So moved.
Oh, yeah.
seconded,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay.
Next item, update from Casco Bay Advisors in regards to data collection report, and we're thrilled to have Brian with us, even though he's making us feel bad that he's down in Florida, sunny Florida, but that's all, we can get over it. But Brian, thanks for taking the time to join us. And I know we just got, I saw I had the report emailed to me yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to really dissect it. And so I was wondering if you could just do a summary of the report. Is that possible?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
And that'll help walk through this. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, I see it twice, one on each screen now. Sorry.
All right. So this is just the cover page. We'll skip over that. The table of contents, that's really where the meat of this comes in. You can ignore section 7 and 8. It really doesn't have to do with the data that we created, but rather it's educational for those who are reading it and wondering what is DSL, or what is hybrid fiber coax, or what is fiber to the home. It provides a little bit more in-depth review of what those technologies are. And we tack that on to all of the studies that we produce like this. So the executive summary just really highlights how did we perform the inventory of the infrastructure, how did we document it, how did we determine the estimated costs, talks about public-private partnerships to fill the gaps, the costs and next steps. So it's just a summarization of what you find in the rest of the body of the report. Going to page 5, in the teal color is the consolidated communications fiber within the town boundaries that we were able to identify. And this fiber is not used for residential services or consumer services, but rather it's used for business, institutional, and for their own networking purposes within consolidated communications. It'll tie into cell sites, remote terminals, and so forth. And it may have been extended to serve a commercial, or I mean a residential property, but if it has been expanded to serve a residential property, that residence is very, very likely paying commercial rates that would be significant. And over here in the far west of the town, I suspect that that was a build to serve a residential customer over there.
I think also there's a light speed unit there that allows them to service their local copper lines through that fiber link as well.
That could be. That could be.
Yeah.
So that's provided just as reference. I mean, you'll get questions from constituents that want to know, well, doesn't Consolidated have fiber in town? Well, yeah, they do. Here it is. It really can't be utilized for residential services, but it could be leveraged if Consolidated was going to build a fiber network.
Right.
Brian, could you elaborate on that? Why it can't be used for residential?
There's the fiber cable that they've put up there may only have 24 fibers in it. So it's a very, very low count fiber cable. It could be very old. You know, they started deploying fiber in the 1980s, 40 years ago. And the fiber that was deployed then is not well suited for today's technology. It could be that they used mechanical splices instead of fusion splices at the time. There's all kinds of reasons, but it was never designed or engineered to provide residential service.
Thank you.
Primarily for their backbone, basically.
Now, in the version I sent you, I suggested that CCI has announced plans to provide fiber to the home in Bar Harbor, and I thought maybe they would be planning to deploy it in Mount Desert, but they have since confirmed for me that the Mount Desert is not on their project schedule to deploy fiber to the home.
Right.
But if the town was interested in partnering with CCI, they would entertain that and enter into discussions.
Yeah, I think their reasoning for that is there are more unserved residences in Bar Harbor than there are currently in Mount Desert.
Well, even in Bar Harbor, they don't plan to
Yeah.
build their fiber to the unserved, but rather primarily wherever there is cable TV infrastructure.
Yeah.
But, you know, they will, when the time comes, they will sit down with Bar Harbor to see if they want to contribute funds to expand to everyone.
Right.
So again, I'm a little bit surprised, but, you know, because there is some considerable density in many areas. But on the flip side, many of those locations are seasonal.
Yep.
And, you know, they view that differently.
Yep.
So the next page shows in blue everywhere there is cable TV infrastructure that passes those homes.
Yep.
They may or may not have those locations may or may not subscribe, but they could.
Yep.
And in green are the areas that do not have cable TV infrastructure passing in front of the homes.
I was at a house last week down on Long Pond, helping them set up a new Spectrum connection. And I think those two green lines that you have going down to Long Pond may be covered now because the houses that I hooked up were kind of to the south of that, actually. So they may have done something relatively recently there. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a moving target.
Right.
And there's a lot of activity going on. And if we go to the next page, that's a little bit larger.
Oh, right there. Yep. Yep.
It could very well be that they would extend from this blue line through.
Yeah, they went. The houses I hooked up were down kind of where that Camp Beach Cliff line is. They're right near the water there. So they ran a line, I think, all along coming in from where the blue line is right now.
Could be, yeah.
Yep. That's a good thing.
So you're 96% covered.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Which is what I would expect. I did want to point out, and I did it here so that I wouldn't forget elsewhere, but Spectrum just announced that for anyone that qualifies for the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, Spectrum will provide the broadband connection for free.
Yeah, we've got maybe 10 families that are taking advantage of that. They had a program that they started last year that was giving you 50 megs, but I think they have upped it, which is nice.
Yeah, it's 100 megs now.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be aware of. And I don't know, when we look at across the state of Maine, about 40% of the locations would qualify. In some counties, it's much higher. I
Right.
don't have any idea of what it is in Mount Desert.
Yeah. It's usually based on, at least in the school, on the free and reduced lunch population, but
Right. So looking at those green uncabled areas, then we compare that against the 15 home per mile standard, where the cable company is required to build out, if there are 15 homes a mile from the closest existing infrastructure. And these are two areas that may qualify under that standard. This area over here, which is Lakeside Road and Echo Lake Road, comes in at 15.8 miles.
yeah,
Now-
some of those houses I know right on this point do have spectrum currently, because I hooked up a couple of them last year down here that have kind of right at that point that's near the lake.
Right here,
Or
or
to the
here?
north, right in there, they have spectrum there currently, so.
I mean, right here they do.
Yeah.
We didn't find any infrastructure down here.
Yeah,
Um,
it's off of that road, but I do know somebody has cable TV and a Spectrum Wi-Fi there, so
All right,
I helped set them up, but that's all right.
so
Yeah.
these are areas that we would have Spectrum examined to
Yep.
see if it meets their standards. And, there are people measured differently than we do. They might decide that it's 0.98 miles instead of 1.14, and
Right.
but it's certainly worth bringing to their attention. This area over here doesn't qualify based on how we have these lines shown. But
Right.
if they were to extend from up here down, they probably would qualify. So
Right.
again, we bring that to their attention.
And Brian, those requirements are under our current franchise agreement with Spectrum? Is that correct?
No, it's actually state statute now,
Okay,
which would supersede any franchise agreement.
okay.
So then we look,
So Brian,
yeah,
quick question. So I was looking, the maps are very helpful, but the only thing I saw was consolidated fiber. Is there anything that shows Spectrum fiber?
the blue is their hybrid fiber coax network. So
Okay,
we don't differentiate between whether it's coax or fiber, because their fiber is limited in use primarily for supporting their coax network. So we don't differentiate between coax and fiber for Spectrum.
okay.
Yeah,
Can I
they
ask a
usually,
question?
Did that answer your question, or
I think so. So it says the blue is just cabled.
it's hybrid fiber coax?
right,
Okay, so wherever the blue is, it's not just coaxial, it's,
It may be just coax, it could be fiber and coax.
yeah,
But recognize that the fiber is used to serve a node that converts the signal from fiber to coax.
right.
So it's limited in use for that hybrid service, if you will.
Okay.
or infrastructure.
Some locations, they will, if you have a business account, use that fiber and actually bring it in if you want to pay for higher speeds. I know a couple of residences that.
Yeah.
have done that.
But
So I have a
generally-
question.
But generally,
You,
they haven't deployed enough fiber in those
Right.
cables to
Right.
provide
For
a
everybody,
fiber connection to residences.
correct. Primarily business is their focus.
how many fibers might be in one of those lines?
It could be anywhere from 2 to 24 to 48. We don't know. I mean,
Yeah, the one we have coming into the school, we use one fiber, and I think there's 48 pairs in there. That's old fiber, though. It was put in by Adelphia originally.
Right.
That goes up to the high school, different
the,
places.
the reason we don't
Right.
differentiate is that fiber, sort of like the phone company fiber that you have in town, is just not
Proprietary.
conducive to residential services.
Right. Right. It's
Brian,
kind of,
do we know if, so it's kind of a black box, this hybrid, we don't really know about what's in there. But can we at least have a claim from Spectrum that could support symmetrical up to 100 or something like that? Do we have that?
It cannot right now. The only way that right now they can provide a symmetrical service is if they have fiber going directly into the home.
Their max upload is 35 with the hybrid?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we had a standard that said 100 symmetrical, this hybrid would not meet that requirement.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And in fact, for the latest Connect Maine grant round, they redefined underserved as anything less than 100 symmetrical. So in a sort of in a convoluted way, they're starting to provide grant dollars to support overbuilding cable TV. Now, the hybrid fiber coax system can be upgraded with a new technology called DOCSIS 4.0,
right.
and provide symmetrical services, but that would require Spectrum to basically change out every active component in their network, which they may do eventually. They're saying that within 4 or 5 years, DOCSIS 4.0 will be commercially available.
Right.
This isn't
Certain
right
parts
now.
of certain parts of the country, they do support it already. I know in Virginia and Norfolk, where my daughter is, they offered it to her. She could get up to 10 gigs down and 6 gigs up for only $1,200 a month.
This is not, we're not talking about router and modem firmware upgrade. We're talking about physical upgrading every component of their
Right.
network. On every pole, every line would have to be upgraded.
Wherever they would have nodes that convert fiber to coax,
Right.
all
All
of their power supplies, all of their splitters and repeaters, and any component that
Right.
uses an electrical signal would need to be upgraded.
Right.
So,
So on one hand, we're 96% covered, but from this 100 symmetrical standard, we are essentially zero. We're 100% underserved.
yes, that's
Interesting.
correct.
Good way to look at it.
So once we had all that mapping done, then it was easy to pull out the exact footage of all of the roads, how many subscribers and so forth. And we use that then to determine what are the costs going to be. And in the subsequent pages, I explain each one of these cost components in detail. But essentially, we take the mileage times 33 poles per mile, which is an assumed quantity of poles based on past projects. And we're assuming that the utility pole make-ready cost would be about $400 per pole. So just before you could start attaching to the poles, you'd have to spend 1.1 million. Now, if it was the town owning this infrastructure, you wouldn't have to pay about $1 million of those fees, because municipal networks are exempt from those make-ready fees, provided it's a municipal-owned network for areas that are unserved or underserved as defined by the Connect Maine Authority. So nobody has exercised that statute yet, but they will be here in the next few months, and we'll see if the pole owners are going to just go ahead and do that, or if they're going to fight it legally. There is an opinion that statute is unconstitutional because it's a taking without compensation. So we really don't know how the poll owners are going to view that yet. So we include it in here, but we recognize that it may not be a cost. You would still have the cost of collecting the poll data, still the cost of submitting the applications. And that's why I reduced it by $1 million in the event that you're not going to need to pay that. The construction costs per mile and the average cost per subscriber location. We've recently increased those costs over the last year. Material costs have increased about 20%. Labor has gone up and is difficult to find. So these costs reflect all of that, but this report or this analysis has a shelf life. So 6 months, 12 months from now, it's likely going to be higher. We just don't know. We're assuming that you could achieve a 40% market share if you built your own fiber network in competition with the cable company. But they're a formidable competitor. We just talked about the FCC ACP plan where they're providing service for free to those who qualify, and free is hard to compete against. They will be a formidable competitor if you were to decide to overbuild them. But we use 40%, and we include then the materials and labor to hook up 40% of the subscribers within this cost category. And then we also have a contingency engineering project management. We use 10%. Once you got through the utility pole make ready process, you revisit that number. Ideally, it would come down. And then we've just looked at the total project cost with and without that $1 million of make ready.
So just to make sure I've got my facts straight here, you're estimating 40% of market share. So out of the 20, how many did we say? 2,200, 2,300 potential subscriber locations. You're guessing that we would have 40% of those subscribe to us as opposed to whatever they've got already. And that these costs reflect that, not a complete 100% fiber to the premises that the town would own.
The backbone network would pass every subscriber.
Okay, all right.
But you would only hook up 40%.
Okay.
So in other words, you wouldn't run a line to a home from the street unless they subscribe to service.
Right. But it would go past their house.
That's at $1,400 per person, essentially. And
Per
you're only
location.
including 40% of those people?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, but the total.
There's a lot more detail behind this. This is a simplification,
Mhm.
but this, it tracks pretty. We're typically within 5 or 10% of the overall cost when we get bids.
Okay. And so the 5,600,000 plus is to run fiber past every home.
And into 40% of the homes.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
And this note you have at the bottom, you said Connect Maine recently changed to 100 over 100. So was this written before that change?
They've had 100 over 100 for a while now.
But you're saying
that was when for quite a while, their build to standard has been 100 over 100. But as far as qualifying for grant dollars, Connect Maine Unserved is anything less than 50 over 10. Underserved is anything less than 100 over 100. And they will pay, if you're passing underserved on your way to unserved, they will fund that network that you're building through underserved areas. This last grant round, and we haven't seen the results of it yet, the criteria changed, and we know that the criteria for the next grant round will be different. We just don't know what it is.
Understood.
And with each federal program that sends funding into the state, each one has different standards and criteria. So I would say that right now, you know, you might be able to qualify to have Connect Maine fund half the project maybe, but you know, you would need a significant local match. And until we get further guidance, you know, I would assume you would have to locally fund at least 50%. Now, these numbers are also useful though when you're talking with other service providers, because now you know what their costs would be. So when you're talking with Consolidated Communications, they're not going to have any make-ready costs because they're already on the poles, and they'll just simply lash the fiber to the existing cables. So you can eliminate 1.17 million right off the bat. If you're talking about extending the Charter Spectrum network for 6.9 miles, you know, you could figure out what that cost would be. Or if another, you know, say GWI wanted to come into town and build a network, this is what their cost would be. So it's good data to have as you're beginning those discussions and potentially negotiations with service providers. And if you were to decide to build your own network, then all of this data is formatted in such a way that it's easily attached to a grant application. You have to provide all the underlying GIS data. So that's sort of the purpose of doing all this.
So just, I get confused with some of this, and I apologize. So if we built our own network out, so I picture in my mind that we're running this fiber everywhere, right? But don't we have to hook into something, right? I mean, we have to work with a provider, right?
So there's a number of different ways. Most towns that are going to build their own network will hire a network operator to operate and maintain the network. Companies like GWI and Axiom and Pioneer Broadband they perform as a network operator in various locations. You would need to connect to the internet in some location so that, you know, your users are connected to the world. And there's a number of different ways to do that. You know, you could lease a fiber off of the island back to an interconnection point. You could lease capacity from Consolidated right at their central office. There's a number of different potential scenarios, and that would all be on the operating side of the business. This study does not pretend to suggest that you could operate the network sustainably. That's a further analysis that you would have to go through. But typically we see that if you owned the network and you had a 40% market share, you could operate it, I wouldn't say profitably, but you could operate it sustainably. In other words, cover all of your expenses.
And then what you could do is you could make further money by saying, hey, Spectrum, if you want to provide cable services, cable TV services to these houses, then you can use our fiber for such and such amount of money.
Theoretically, yes. In practice, Spectrum and Consolidated have both refused to use other people's networks.
Okay.
Is a good example of that, the Baileyville operation, 2 towns built out their own system themselves, dark fiber, open access, but only one provider, one ISP is actually using it.
Right.
So it's open to anybody, but they've only got one provider on.
Yeah, and so, really comes back to how do you define success? Traditionally, when we look at open access networks, you would define success where you have at least 3 service providers using the network. If it's just one service provider, then I wouldn't say that model was successful in achieving its goals, because you don't have competition over that network. But in those areas, Spectrum is still maintaining their network and offering service. Consolidated's offering DSL. So there is still some competition. And we don't know, we haven't seen the financials for that operation to determine if it is sustainable or not, or if they're going to have to use town revenues to help operate the network. I don't know. So.
And cable TV is going to become obsolete anyway, isn't it?
Well,
everyone
it is
is using really internet for Hulu services and things like that for.
Yeah, as the older generations age out, it will become obsolete.
Right,
Yeah.
like Spectrum offers their lineup of cable TV channels now at reduced price if you use an Apple TV or something of that nature to provide your content at costs probably 50% less than if you use their cable boxes, but you do need a secondary device or a smart TV to run those.
Yeah, the reality though is there's still a large segment of the population that
like a cable box. Yep, that's true.
And so.
Yep.
So the rest of the report, it just goes into further detail about utility pole make ready, the construction process. And then really goes into the different partnership strategies and next step recommendations. There's been a number of service providers that have looked at building network on the island. And every time they've looked at it, they've passed. So I'm aware that GWI has looked at it, Axiom looked at it, Pioneers looked at it, Matrix has looked at it, even Lincolnville Tidewater further south has looked at it. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't take another look. It just means that it has piqued people's interest in the past, and when they've dug into it, they declined.
How long ago was that, would you say?
6-9 months ago.
Oh, that recently?
I know Bar Harbor is working with Pioneer networks because I had to bring them around to the various municipal structures in Bar Harbor to help them formulate a quote for linking all of the municipal buildings in Bar Harbor, but that's something I think just within the town of Bar Harbor to doing directly.
Yeah, but through that process, that's where all of those providers took a look.
Right.
I strongly recommend that you share the report with all service providers and have a discussion with them.
Yeah.
But I recognize that the 2 likeliest candidates are Spectrum and Consolidated, just given by virtue of the fact that they're already on all the poles. So they're the lowest cost, but as a committee and as a town, you really need to refine your goal and vision at this point. What do you want to do? Do you want to, or are you satisfied with simply filling in the gaps with cable TV infrastructure and seeing how that works out? Are you intent on getting fiber to everyone? And if so, are you okay with subsidizing a provider to partially fund that build out and have the provider invest the rest? In essence, that's a subsidy. They're not going to entertain partial ownership by the town. Or do you want to own your own asset? So you sort of have some decisions to make. And you don't have to make those decisions right now, but you should be striving to make those decisions as you're talking with all of the service providers about the content of the report. Certainly, before you go out to any RFP, you need to you need to narrow your selection dramatically and focus in on what you want to do. And then you are also going to need community support for a significant portion of the funding.
I have two questions on the subsidy. One is, could we get grant funding for a subsidy model? And second question is there a back of the napkin rough percentage of what the expectation is for the town to contribute? Like, is it a 50-50 usually, or a third or a quarter? Do you have any kind of just high level ideas about the subsidy model?
It really varies by town. I believe that at the end of the day, if you were to have a negotiation with Consolidated, and let's say their cost would be $4 million, if you kicked in $1 million, I think they'd probably build it. But it depends. It depends on the criteria of the grant programs. And by the way, grants can be used for both subsidy and ownership. But it really depends on the criteria of the grant programs. And it depends upon your partner's service strategy or expansion strategy. And, it used to be that the service providers' strategic plans would evolve maybe once every 1 to 3 years. Now it seems like they're evolving every 1 to 3 months with all of the federal dollars out there. So it is so difficult to determine, what the model could look like. It's changing that rapidly.
But in theory, just taking this example, they say it's a $4 million build out. We say we can kick in $1 million. We go together with Consolidated to build a grant proposal, like that both parties join in to write that grant.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that Consolidated would write the grant on its own. It could be that the town would write the grant with Consolidated support. The town of Swans Island has TDS as their local phone company. I wrote the application on behalf of the town of Swans Island, and TDS provided all of the data for the application. So there's no set rule.
Have they won the application? Did they get the funding?
There's been no awards announced yet,
Okay.
but they
Good luck.
were planning to have the announcements on the 27th. Whether or not they do it then, I don't know.
So one of the unknowns, if I understand things, is that even though we kind of know where fiber, so to speak, has been run. We don't know the quality of that fiber. Is that correct?
But you do know that it's not suitable for residential service.
Right. So having
The
said
fact
that,
that there's fiber there doesn't really have a bearing on anything at this point.
so if we say our objective, I think that was one of the things you asked was, is our objective to run fiber by every home, right? If that indeed is our objective, we meaning either the town of Mount Desert or one of the providers that we partner with have to probably run all new fiber most of the way, right?
Yep.
And then, and also, is that now that they already have like some type of fiber up, you know, some quality of fiber, is it a lot easier to string new fiber up because that's already in place, or?
No,
doesn't-
no, because the new fiber, they will simply lash it to either the existing fiber or the existing copper cables.
Yeah.
So from a construction standpoint, the fact that there's some fiber out there has no bearing from the construction, but they may utilize that fiber to their remote terminals and build out new fiber from the remote terminals. But even when they do that, they'll overbuild the existing fiber.
Yeah.
But it's in that instance that you took out the make-ready costs on your cost projections because of that.
Yeah, with Spectrum and Consolidated, they're both on, Consolidated's on every utility pole and Spectrum is on 96% of them. So just consider that they're both on every pole, so they don't have that expense.
Even though
You
Spectrum
don't
doesn't
have,
own the pole,
you don't have a large portion of that expense if you build the fiber as a municipal owned network. So it sort of does put you on parity in that regard.
even though Spectrum doesn't own the pole, just the fact that they're on it already means they don't have to do make ready.
Correct.
They've already paid once, so.
I understood. And do you have a sense of if we, so with Consolidated, it seems like we would, if they were interested, it would likely be a new fiber build out. If we had a partnership with Spectrum, do you have any insight as to, would they basically say, we're keeping our existing hybrid, we are only really willing to build out unserved and eventually upgrade to DOCSIS 4? Or do you think they would actually run new fiber as part of a new subsidized partnership?
Depends on how much you want to subsidize them by. I mean, it really comes down, it's a math equation, it's dollars. What we are seeing is, a few years ago, you partnered with Charter to expand their network into the Pretty Marsh area. And at that time, they extended a hybrid fiber coax network. If they were making that decision today, it would have been all fiber. Because that was a large area. If they're going to go into a new town that they're not in at all now, it's all fiber. If it's small little extensions like you would have in Mount Desert right now, they would just use coax unless you were willing to provide a significant subsidy for them to build fiber everywhere. The industry, there's a lot of debate right now whether the cable systems nationwide are actually going to implement DOCSIS 4.0 or just simply overbuild all their networks. We don't know. It's a big debate.
Brian, if Spectrum or Charter were to go into a new area and put in all fiber, would it be at those outrageous monthly charges that were the example earlier? $800 a month, I think is what we talked about last time, or?
$800 a month?
I think that was an example that Wendell provided, wasn't it, of somebody
No,
who's gig over,
That's a big business plan, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe the question is, if we subsidize, can we do, or is there typically part of that agreement a set
affordable rates.
rates for subscribers?
So with Consolidated and Spectrum, regardless of the amount of subsidy, you'll have little to no influence over rates.
Correct.
So I would say perish the thought. Don't put any weight to achieving that.
The only way you get a better,
Self-excuse.
the only way you get a better rate with Spectrum is to every year or two threaten to disconnect. And then you get referred and then you can negotiate your rate down sometimes.
But, you know, those are nationwide companies. You know, if they were operating just in Maine and every town negotiated its own deal, they'd have 500 different deals.
Right.
Administratively and operationally, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a smaller partner, say Axiom or Pioneer Broadband, there may be some flexibility there, you know, to impact the rate.
Right.
But if the greatest flexibility would be if you own the asset, then you dictate what the rates are. So
Right.
the island of Islesboro built a fiber network to every home. They charge $30 a month for gigabit symmetrical service.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, they're also using some tax dollars to subsidize the ongoing operation of the network. And they use tax dollars to service
Right.
the
Yeah.
debt on
Right.
the construction.
Right.
And that's a perfectly acceptable model if, as a town, you choose to do it that way. It's a pretty attractive model. And the select board on Islesboro, when they initially started looking at it, said, look, if we're going to do this, then it needs to be affordable to everyone on the island, regardless of income. And the select board said, we consider affordable being $30 a month. They send out one invoice a year for $360. You pay it or you get disconnected. It's very, very simple. And it's a gigabit symmetrical service. So every town's different. It depends on, you know, what your vision and goals are and what kind of support you have from the community.
And when you build out your own municipal network, there's this initial outlay of capital for the building. Then you're partnering with an operator and they have ongoing fees.
Right.
And then is there an interconnection fee for us hooking into from our network into the greater
Well,
network?
that would be your service provider who would have to buy internet from somebody, yeah.
And so,
Either you buy it or they buy it, but that's all built into the operation of the network, yes.
so the operator makes that agreement and kind of deals with that.
That's one way, or the town could make that agreement. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility. Typically, the towns don't want to be involved in that level of detail.
Right.
Essentially, you have an asset that you're hiring someone else to run, and the town, at least on the island of Islesboro, I think the broadband committee, the broadband oversight committee meets on a quarterly basis to review reports from the provider, give feedback and so forth. But at this point, it's not a very burdensome effort on the part of the town.
And does
It's
the
just sort of-
operator do maintenance and so on?
Yep,
Right.
takes care of everything, soup to nuts.
You know who operates that network? Just curious.
GWI.
GWI, yeah, they're a pretty good group, yeah. Yeah. They have some presence. They have some presence in Bar Harbor still, I believe.
So would you suggest that we contact Consolidated and Spectrum and maybe another company if we wanted to do our own thing, you know? And would we say to them, say, listen, we want to run fiber to every household. What can you offer us? How would,
So the way that we recommend you do this is, and this sounds self-serving, but you really need somebody representing you in those discussions. So what we do is, when we do that, is we send the report via email to every service provider and request a meeting with them to review the report, make sure that they understand what's in the report and all the underlying data, and encourage them to consider building out in the town. And if they're willing to do that, will they build out the entire town, or will they require a subsidy? So it's a discussion that you have. And invariably, you're going to find one or two providers that said, yeah, let's talk further about this. Let's run some numbers. That, you know, the meetings typically last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. It just varies. And so it's not a big level of effort.
Yeah.
But that's where I would start. Spectrum will come to the table. Consolidated will come to the table. I don't know if anybody else will.
And if we do the municipal thing, would we be able to talk to, let's say, GWI or Pioneer Axiom and say, our plan is potentially to do this. Can you give us some estimates for operational costs? So we could package it
Yes.
all up and go to the town and say, if we build our own network, this is what we're anticipating the entire thing to look like.
Oh yeah. What each provider has a different model, a different business model. So you can achieve that by going out, you know, in essence, through this process or through a little bit more formal RFP if you wanted, to get that feedback. If it's an asset that you want to own, you really need to before you even get to that step, you want to create your own 5-year financial pro forma to see, is this feasible? And is it at what market share and service price is it feasible? To make sure that this is something you really want to do. And then you sit down with the service providers. Keep in mind, you're always going to want to make sure that you're as knowledgeable about this as the service provider, so that you don't get taken advantage of in any negotiation. So have someone
Any of us.
at the table with you when you do all of that.
Would you be able to play that role?
We do that routinely.
Yeah.
We do it on a time and expense basis because you just never know how much time it's going to
Yeah.
take. But you know, we could go through all of that sharing of the report and having the meetings, and the cost to you would probably be less than $2,000. We have meetings with all of the service providers every 2-3 weeks. And typically with these things, we fit them in with other meetings and just, you know, make it efficient. So that's how we've historically done it. But it's communicating and getting that out there. I think you can have some meaningful discussions with CCI and Spectrum and maybe others, but remains to be seen. But again, you're going to want to decide, do you want to own this asset or not?
Mhm.
And do you want to do what's required to build the community support to own the asset?
Well, that could be part of, you know, if we're going to send this out to Spectrum and Consolidated, but we also, like Pete said, we send it out to Axiom and whoever else would help us build our own. And then that's where we can say, okay, to the town people, this is going to cost you X number of dollars to have our own system. The beauty of that is we can charge our own rates, or we go in this other direction, and it's going to boil down to dollars and cents, I guess.
Yeah, and every town is different.
Yeah.
Every select board is different.
Yep.
Every town manager is different.
So Kathy, it feels like I'm going to have to leave in a couple minutes, but that sounds like a next step, doesn't it, to you, Kathy, and everyone else?
Yeah, I think that we have said all along, we need to get some facts
Yep.
and lay out options for people to weigh in on, so that here's option A, and it would cost this much. Here's option B, it would cost this much. Here's option C, and it would cost that much. And looking at the future proof. I mean, one of the earlier conversations before many of us were on this board was, we want to build something that's future proof. We want to do it once and it's going to last 100 years, you know? And I'm not sure that cable is the way to go. I think you're right. Streaming services are coming in. People are moving away from the cable box. That's not necessarily a future-proof system.
Right.
So, but I think, how we put that together. So yes, we need to gather up details, put it out there and get input from people. And part of that is letting them understand how this might improve their lives or their dollar figure, because if people are, we pay $100 for service that's not great. So,
Yeah.
And I think, who would I talk to at GWI to see how this thing's working down in Islesboro? Because I think that's a learning experience, good information.
Yeah, I would recommend you talk to Islesboro and not GWI.
Okay,
And I can share with you, it's Roger Heinen is the chair of the committee. I think he still is. And he was part of the committee when they built the network. So he understood and helped define the vision and goals. He understood the whole construction process. He understands the operation of the network. But there are
and that's Roger
Heinen. I will, Kathy, I'll shoot you and Derlin his contact information. You can,
thank you.
That'd be great, Frank, if you could talk with them about that. That'd be super.
Why don't we invite them to come to one of our meetings?
Yeah, could do that as well.
just keep in mind, they get a lot of those requests.
Yeah.
So I don't know what their appetite will be, but Roger has always been very, very gracious to have a conversation. And if you want to go out there, they will host you. But it is the country of Islesboro, so just keep that going in.
Which is
I have
different from
cousins
Vinyl
there, so
Haven.
yeah.
The beauty is you now have solid foundational data. You know how many subscribers, you know what the costs are, you know what the mileage is. That's a lot of work that the service providers then don't have to do on their own. So they can quickly look at this to see if they have interest, and it puts you on equal footing. So, but yeah, I would get, recommend getting this out and having those discussions start as soon as possible.
Mhm.
This has been really informative. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, this is starting to come together, I think, in my head anyway. But I apologize to everyone. I have to leave now, but I guess I would recommend that we just say, let's go ahead and reach out to, or have Brian reach out for us. I mean, we're gonna have to decide if we have a couple $1,000 to spend.
Right, exactly. And I think in order to do that, we probably need a proposal from you to do that with dollar figures attached. We have to run it by the select board to authorize that kind of contract.
Yep. Right. I can put that together for you. That's,
Okay. Thank you.
Brian, thank you.
Thank you very much.
when's the next select board meeting that you would be presenting that?
Derlin,
Yeah, I would think that the earliest you could get in would be the 11th of May. They meet this week, but the genders are all closed off, and their meeting after that will be right after the annual town meeting, which is more or less an organizational meeting. I would not recommend you would try to bring any serious business before that, because they're going to be anxious to get out of there as quick as they can. So I would aim for May 11th.
and when should we have something in so it makes the packet for that?
Well, that, let me tell you, I can tell you that.
I love all of Derlin's giant calendars.
May, I'm sorry, it's May 11th.
They're not susceptible to internet outages.
May 16th, actually.
May 16 is the meeting?
Yes, which is a Monday.
Okay, and then
So
May,
I would ideally like to have it by May 11th.
okay,
Yeah, I'll get it to you well in advance of that. I've added it to my to-do list, so I just didn't know if it was something you needed in the next 48 hours or something, so.
Oh,
And Brian, it sounds like you recommended us kind of internally looking at a pro forma of feasibility of like, is this even affordable for us to do the build out based on these numbers that you brought?
I will, in that proposal, I'll put a section in there about doing that as well as an option. You can just exercise it at any time. And we have a rather sophisticated model that we tend to improve with each time we utilize it for a client. You get the benefit of that model. So.
Okay,
you know,
I thought you were maybe gonna say that we should kind of on our own do that analysis, but if you have a model.
No, you wouldn't have the operational knowledge to be able to, from a broadband telecom perspective, to be able to put that together. But I'll give you an estimated what I think that would cost in terms of the number of hours. It won't be great.
That would be great. Yeah, because that's kind of one of the big pieces for, like you said, having that knowledge before we go to the operators for a municipally owned model. We want to make sure that we understand our numbers. And I think that's definitely one of our options on our a la carte menu that we're trying to present to the town. So that's an important piece.
Right.
and Brian, could you make the GIS information you have on Vetro available to us? So we can
Yep.
poke around on it ourselves rather than just looking at these larger maps in one-dimensional views. It would be helpful.
What I will do is I'll ask Vetro to copy it out of my instance into
Perfect.
yours.
That would be great.
And they should do that as part of their agreement with you.
Well, and we are part of the cohort 3. We're one of the towns that's in there. So of their, Vetro Cares for Maine program. So, and I know that one of the comments you made in your report here was that you've asked, and the companies don't share poll data, but I know Vetro is trying to get that from them, working with Connect Maine Authority. And I think Spectrum has shared some information, but not the other. So
Right. And that too is an evolving subject. For instance, in the state of New Hampshire, the state maintains a database of all the poll data. So you don't have to go out and collect it. I'm aware of a group of towns that signed a non-disclosure with CMP to get the poll data.
really? Okay.
I don't know what the terms of that NDA were. But it shouldn't be as hard as it is. I actually have a copy of a database of every Versant poll they have in the state, but I can't use it because I'm not supposed to have it. These things, float around, but yeah, it's expensive to collect all that data,
Right, exactly.
labor-wise.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a great COA project. GIS mapping, they might have some stuff there that they've already done anyway. So we should look at what they have collected.
There might be something on that one I shared with you guys earlier on. I'll have to pull it out and see the different layers they have on there.
Right. And so if we do have to go through that work, one of the things you said on here was the application submittals. Each application is limited to 200 polls. So we'd need 15 applications. So whether it was Spectrum or CCI, you can only say, we want this work on this set of poles?
Yeah, basically, they limit the number of poles on a make-ready application to no more than 200. And there is an application fee for each application. And it's a very archaic system.
That's why they charge you $6,000 if you hit a pole.
Don't try to make sense of it. You'll drive yourself batty.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay.
Good.
Anything else we should cover?
I think that sounds pretty good. We made some good progress. Thank you, Brian. As always, sure.
Hey, and Derlin, I talked with Steve at Bar Harbor yesterday about getting this pricing. We are now going to go to another construction contractor since Pioneer has been less than responsive.
Good.
So I apologize. I'm embarrassed because I recommended them, and historically they've been a very good company to work with.
Yeah, I asked them to do some fiber testing for us at the schools, and I called them 3 times and emailed them 6 times, and have got like 0 response. So yeah, we moved on as well.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is super busy.
Yeah. Yep.
Everyone has more on their plate than they can handle. But my concern is if they're not responsive at this stage,
Right.
I'm not sure I want to go into a construction project with them. So.
Yes. Ouch.
And is that for the connection between our police department and the Bar Harbor Police Department? So
Yes.
that has been approved for construction?
The town of Bar Harbor has allocated funds for their network.
Right.
Okay.
Your Derlin is waiting for what are the costs going to be
Right.
for the connections into Northeast Harbor.
Oh, we don't even have the construction costs yet.
The
Correct.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay, yeah. And Derlin, would that have to go before a town meeting to
So
approve?
I've already got I've got a warrant article in there. I'm wanting to
Okay.
see how accurate that is, because we might have to do some sort of a later modification if those numbers aren't accurate. We had to go with what we had to get it
Okay.
onto the warrant.
But
So
we've got a not to
Brian
exceed.
was very helpful, and I put a fairly inflated figure in there, but I don't know if I inflated it enough, so we'll see.
Mhm. Okay,
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you
Always a
very much.
pleasure.
We'll let you get out to the golf.
Fun down there.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
So, we have, this is April. Our next meeting is, what is it, May something. It is after the town meeting. Have we decided what we want to do at the town meeting to provide any information?
Not sure. We had brief conversations in one of the meetings about maybe some of these reports. Is this kind of a report that we could share with people or not? Or maybe bring some of the highlights out onto a poster print or something? Or
Maybe we should meet a week earlier, first week of May. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think if we're going to do anything, we need to decide what we're going to do, who's going to do it, what it's going to be, and TikTok. So yeah,
We'd actually be talking in April, because the meeting itself is the first week of May. It's the 3rd.
yeah, May 3rd is the town meeting. That
Correct.
day.
Wow,
Yeah,
like 2
Only a
weeks.
couple weeks away, right?
the couple,
Well,
yes, exactly.
It would probably be good to at least have a quick, here's where we are, here's what we're trying to find out. Because we don't have a ton of information. We know the cost of building it, but that doesn't give the full picture of a municipally owned network. And we don't have any idea of cost of a subsidy partnership.
Right.
and we don't have any idea of cost of just having Spectrum finish the thought. So does it make sense to even say anything, or should we say, hey, this is what we're working on?
Well, we did that letter. I thought that letter was pretty good.
And that goes in the annual report. So the question is, who actually looks at that? If we get, it's hard to say these days how many people would show up in person, but if we had, an easel with a display on it that said, these are the things we've done, we've gotten this report, these are the next steps, how strongly do you feel about this? I don't know. That's what I'd love to know is, what should we do? Maybe we can get together before the end of the month. We've only got 2.5 weeks. Is there a possibility of meeting next week to sort of throw out some ideas and sort of bring ideas to the table and say, how about this much information? And I can help produce materials if we know what it is we want to say and who's going to be standing there, et cetera. So.
Yeah, I'm around next week. I'm not taking a vacation,
Oh
unfortunately.
yeah, it's school vacation week, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be available. I'm going to be wrangling children all week.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not going to be available because hopefully I'll avail myself of one of those shirts.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Okay. So, well, there's the following week.
Yeah, pick a day that works for you and some in the
Oh.
afternoon, I can't do it during the day, but after.
All
3
right. How
3:30.
about like the 25th or 26th is a Monday and Tuesday and 1 week before our town meeting?
Yeah, those are fine for me.
Frank or Pete?
what time? 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock works for me if it works for anybody else.
Yeah,
I'll
Because I
try
could
and
Zoom
see if I
in.
can, but you guys should go for it. And
Okay.
All right.
Can we say Monday the 25th?
sure.
4:25 at 4 p.m.
Okay.
All right. And you know what? I don't think this has to be an official town committee meeting, but maybe just some of us. So I'll send out a link
Yep, that'd be fine.
to do that. I don't think it has to go on a town calendar or anything like that. But just some planning for how we can present some information and what information we want to present. But that would be great.
Sounds good.
So that's the 25th.
Right.
Yes, Monday, April 25 at 4 p.m.
Got it.
So noted.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pete, if you can join us, great. And if not, if you have any thoughts, email them away and we'll incorporate them.
Yeah, if you think of anything you need printed ahead of time, I've got a big printer right in back of me here I can use.
Oh, good. That would be great.
All right.
Do you have a poster board too?
I don't know if it's poster board, but I can get some from
Something to hang
the
it?
art room.
Good. Okay, terrific. Okay, thank you, everybody.
All right. Have
Thank you.
a good evening.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
thank
Meeting
you.
adjourned. All right, bye.
Bye.